Ever notice how prophecy about Jesus is never direct, but for example, out of Egypt have I called my son. Notice in the Old Testament, God was talking about Israel, bringing Israel out of Egypt, calling Israel God's son. God did not say, I got a son, and I will call him out of Egypt. Oh, there's more. Listen up.
Important. Like when Ezekiel says that God will send David, does he mean a second coming of David? Well, we never really hear that otherwise.
No. What it means, in my estimation, is David was anointed by God to be king. And David's descendants, forever and ever and ever and ever, would be king of Israel. In other words, from now on, every king of Israel will be a descendant of David. That's what it means David shall be king again. They had lost their king when they went into exile, but they were going to get him back, and it would be a descendant of David.
But it's not impossible. There were people that thought that Moses would come back and that Elijah would. But is that a Messiah? Well,
where in the Old Testament does it say Moses would come back? You're wrong. Go back and do your studying, dumbass. It says, I will send you Elijah the prophet in Malachi.
Well, given who David was, it could well be, but that's really very ambiguous. We don't know what the writer had in mind.
Yeah, I'll give it to you. All these prophecies about the Messiah are ambiguous.
And most of the other...
But hold on. We'll get to what I gotta say.
Things that are said to be messianic prophecies, even if you don't think they're predicting Jesus. Like a couple of passages in Isaiah, I think one in chapter 9, one in chapter 11, usually called Mighty God, Everlasting Father, etc. The government will rest upon his shoulders. This kind of stuff turns out, once you look at form criticism, like is there a particular literary type in a passage, that reveals that what you're reading there are enthronement oracles of each new king of Judah and perhaps Israel, or their birth oracles, which kind of amount to the same thing, and it's hard to distinguish them because in Psalm 2, which is another one, I will tell of the decree of Yahweh. He has said to me, you are my son, today I have begotten you. Well, we know from Egyptian parallels and others that this was the kind of official rhetoric of the enthronement of a new king. As of his enthronement, he counts as the Son of God.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or like Micah. Now that's one of the most direct prophecies of the coming King of Israel. The King of Israel will come out of Bethlehem, and it says, "Whose goings forth have been from old, from everlasting." So, it sounds like, if you take it literally, it would seem to say this king has been around forever and ever and ever. But like he's saying, these are enthronement oracles, exaggerations. But wait a minute, it gets better.
And at the end it says, kiss the Son, or bow down to the Son, or whatever, lest he strike you in his wrath and all that. That has to do with the king. Now, scholars still debate, and they're right to debate, whether this meant that the king of Judah, as soon as the old one died and the new one took the throne, that he was given divine nature or just given divine stature, as the Pope is not supposed to be Christ, but he's the vicar of Christ on earth. Well, it may have been the same way when they called the King of Judah mighty God and so forth. They may simply have meant you're the placeholder for God.
Yeah, but look at it this way. What if those passages are not just poetic, but actual, literal of a person? What if there's a man who fit this literally, who was always around forever and ever, whose goings forth have been from old, from everlasting? What if there's a king who was the son of man, but who's also the mighty God? What if he was that? Then Jesus would be the literal fulfillment of what was otherwise poetic and encirclement, throne, whatever, prophecies that were not meant to be taken literally, but if they were taken literally, they are fulfilled in Jesus Christ.
You're his representative on earth, and you have the mandate of heaven, as they would say in China. And so these passages sound like they're, or it says that the lion will lie down with the lamb in his day and peace.
What if there's a kingdom where this king is actually man and God, and they literally had the lion lay down with the lamb? What if this is being what you call exaggeration, was prophesied, was meant as exaggeration, but will be fulfilled literally in Jesus Christ?
Peace will prevail, and the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to release the prisoners and liberate the oppressed. That these were all repeated liturgies, kind of like the swearing in ceremony of a new president. They weren't predicting anybody. They were just giving.
But there are prophecies, hidden prophecies, with just enough hint of, hey, this is what hereafter is going to be like. Like in Acts, when Peter says, on the day of Pentecost, this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. And he says, let's turn there. And verse 14, verse 12, chapter 2. And they were all amazed and were in doubt, saying one to another, what meaneth this? When they were all speaking in different tongues. Others mocking said, these men are full of new wine. But Peter, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said unto them, ye men of Judea, and all that dwell at Jerusalem, be it known unto you, and hearken to my words. For these are not drunken, as ye suppose, seeing that it is but the third hour of the day. But this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out of my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy. And your young men shall see vision, and your old men shall dream dreams. And all my servants and my handmaidens I will pour out in those days of my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show wonders in the heavens above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapors of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon shall be in the blood, before that come great and notable day of the Lord come. Those old believers should have known that the end time was not yet, because they saw the people getting the Spirit poured out on them, but they did not see the moon being turned into blood yet, nor the sun being darkened. So they should have known, hey, there's something yet to happen. Until it all happens, it's not the end time.
The exaggerated hopes for the reign of the new king.
Yeah, the exaggerated hopes for the reign of the king. What if those exaggerated hopes would literally come true?
And then there were other parts of the royal rituals of enthronement, including the humiliation of the king and then his re-exaltation, which is based on the royal ideology of the divine combat. I've talked about this a bunch of times, that is, as God's representative on earth, the king would undergo a dramatized version of the combat myth whereby Yahweh, like Marduk and various other Near Eastern deities, they became the king of the gods by volunteering to defeat and destroy the chaos dragons, though in the process they were devoured and killed, but rose from the dead, or at least carved their way out of Leviathan or whatever dragon was involved, and so that they had a kind of a dramatization where you'd have a bunch of guys in a dragon suit like in a Chinese New Year festival, and you'd have the king and he'd make a show of maybe with a wooden sword defeating the dragon, and all the guys would lie down, and then he'd go up the steps to the palace, and the high priest would knock the crown off his head and tweak his ears and so on. But why? Well, because this also had to do with the regeneration of vegetation for the new year. The energy of the earth had run out, and this was because of the sins of the people. And and so the king was the bearer of these sins. And this was the humiliation, was the token punishment for the sins. But once that happened, his crown was put back, and he would go into the temple and supposedly get a vision of the tablets of destiny. In one of the songs it says, "My days were written in the book before I even existed." Well, yeah, they figured all of history was written ahead of time.
Sounds like Jesus to me.
Something that I think Calvinists would like, because it was a sort of predestination. Well, so
fuck the Calvinists. Calvinism has been used by the devil to cause much chaos and torment. Like somebody once said when I was 13 years old, my mom said, some people say that the doctrine of once saved, always saved comes straight from the pits of hell. Is Calvinism a twisting of the gospel of Jesus Christ by the pits of hell?
Isaiah 53 and possibly Psalm 22, which are always quoted as predictions of the sufferings of the Messiah, or just as often of Jesus as the Messiah. These things do have to do with the ancient sacred king business, but they're not predicting anybody. They're not in the future tense. It would be
what if they are?
Very easy to say. There are predictions in the Old Testament, but as far as I can see, there are not messianic predictions. Like Isaiah 53, we thought he was the sinner. Everything was on his shoulders, but no, it was our transgression. That fits the attested ideology of the king being the suffering servant, and so on. Christians say, come on, how can you deny that Isaiah 53 matches Jesus? Well, yes, it does, but not for the reason you think.
Yes, it does.
They're drawing on this ancient tradition and applying it to Jesus.
But what are these ancient traditions, these exaggerations, actually happened literally in Jesus?